I'm a new developer, I'm an aspiring developer. What is the skill I should learn? And everybody's like, you need to learn React. You gotta learn Next.js because that's where most of the jobs are. Well, guess what? On every website, you know what it all results in? HTML and CSS, no matter how you choose to render it. It's weird to me that the question of what should be the thing that I should learn so that I get the most amount of value in is not the front of the front end.
What are the skills I need to learn was your question. And what they were answering is, what will get someone in the door fastest? What is the tool that I need to use? Understanding the underlying code. This is why I love staying in front end. Until HTML and CSS, until rendering engines like Chromium go away and don't power the LED screens at drive-thrus or inside stores, there's always going to be work for someone that knows how to use these tools. Period.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Modern Web Podcast. I am your host, Rob Osell. I'm the VP of Innovation at This.Labs. Today, I'm happy to be joined by my co-host, Danny Thompson. Danny is the Director of Engineering at This.Labs. Danny, how are you doing today?
I'm well, sir. How are you? I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited too. As the time of this recording, we're getting pretty close to the holidays, so very excited to squeeze in another episode here before we head out. And today we're going to be sitting down and talking to Pat Clark. Pat is the Director of Engineering at Lumen Learning. Pat, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you?
Doing great. We're going to have such an exciting topic. We're going to kick it off, and we're going to say, Pat, you were mentioning to us that you think the web is getting a little gray and boring. And we want to talk about that a little bit and what that might mean. So to get us started, why don't you make your case? Why is the web these days gray and boring?
Sure. So a little bit of setup first. I am a front-of-the-front developer by trade. I grew up as a teen learning table-based layouts, learning CSS before there was an official spec. So I kind of came up through the ranks. The current job market today is really dictating and driving everyone. You got to be full stack. You got to be full stack, right? And I think two areas where I'm seeing cuts with companies is DevRel for product companies. And I think it's design and front-end engineers for, say, pure product folks. So there's sometimes less of a drive around, can I create great user experience so long as I deliver a product that will meet your price point? For example, we were talking before we started hitting record. I hockey coach, play hockey, talk hockey, and one of the leagues I play in, they use recreation software. There are so many companies that have products designed around how you help run a team, how you help run a league, so on and so forth. There are some terrible products out there. It's like no one ever thought, hey, here's a user story. Let me walk through this. Let me make sure I'm hitting some customer pain points. Because at the end of the day, it can be a league, an institution, someone that kind of dictates this is the product that you have to use as an individual user, whether it's you're a player, you're a parent of a child who is playing, so on and so forth. You just have to use whatever a league dictates. And it's just the one chief example that comes to mind outside of, budgeting software. Things that get acquired, they slowly degrade over time as they're integrated into larger software suites. And just the decline of kind of personal and niche websites. Everything that gets acquired gets absorbed and transformed into something that's a little bigger than what it started out as. And so this has just been transpiring year after year after year. And I think there's a little bit of movement to, frankly, make the web weird again, where it's more personal. The rise of the personal blog or personal website is kind of coming back up. I know I finally dusted off the cobwebs of my personal site. I'm starting to spend a little more time on it. Trust me, it's not good. I am just as much to blame for this phenomenon that I'm describing, but everything just kind of feels a little less inviting. Or
was there a time that was
less?
Was there a time when things were great? Because I'm thinking, I'm wondering if this is like a cyclical thing. Because I know that there was certainly a time, 8 years ago or so, when everything was like a bootstrap or, a material design website. And so the entire web just looked exactly the same.
Yeah.
Is this a thing that ebbs and flows a little bit,
I
or
think so. I think it's wherever business priorities are at day to day, that's going to dictate the priorities behind what engineering teams or development teams are going to work on, what a designer may or may not work on. Are they working on marketing material, or are they working on, application design? I think that's where part of the ebb and flow comes from. I'm not going to call out any frameworks or tools because I don't think it's similar to the bootstrap phenomenon, where that's just what everyone was using and everyone used kind of a UI tool.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't
To
that
build
Bootstrap was a
things
problem. It was just that it allowed
It
people
was
very
super
quickly
accessible.
to
It was
create
super
stuff that looked
accessible.
the same. Yeah.
And anyone who got familiar and comfortable with the tool could start to build things for themselves without having an extra person intervene. I think we're seeing a little bit of that now where, Figma is the predominant design tool of the day today in the end of 2024. And there's all this exporting of code. And so there's a lot of processes where we're cutting a lot of corners in certain areas. Some for good, but some, I think, as a byproduct, everything kind of feels the same and generic.
Yeah, everything's got a bit of that WordPress feel, right? Like a lot of marketing pages now, it's like you get the banded sections, like the colored like little bands, and you're just like, ah, yes. But it's hard to deny that it is still effective. Again, going back to that bootstrap idea, like it is the baseline that we all accept now as competent for websites that we view. But it's interesting that you're right. That it seems like a lot of companies are fine to just stop at competent and not necessarily like innovate in that way.
Right. Where I was having a conversation with a group of devs probably 2 weeks ago where we were debating the carousel and why for a marketing site is the carousel still as predominant as it is today, knowing there's metrics and data that suggest no one goes past the first slide. The call to action on the first slide will get the most engagement, and then it's you're falling off a cliff otherwise. So why are people continue to build it? Why are we continuing to ask things when we have data that says this isn't what people actually want or are engaging with? So it's a strange, I feel like we're about to kind of turn a corner on this phenomenon. I just don't know what direction we're going to head in next, whether it's new or we round back and kind of revisit some of the things we say did 10 to 15 years ago, somewhere in that vein.
The other part of this phenomenon that's actually kind of interesting, though, is that even for the sites that maybe don't look drab, but they are so the same. Like, for example, one of the things that you see everywhere now are the Parallax sales websites, right? You see this with like Apple. Every time Apple launches a new product, you're like, I've already seen the page. I don't even have to open the page. I've seen the page. And it's funny because it's extremely high quality. It's gorgeous, but it's also the exact same sales site you've seen 100 times over. And I'm curious your thoughts on that. Like, it's not ugly, but it is also still boring. Is that right in that sense?
A little bit. I've sat through enough kind of first initial sales kickoff, or not sales, design kickoffs, where a company just dances around the fact, I want to look exactly like my competitor, but with our branding. Can you do that? It's still happening today. And also the rise of theme builders. I think we said it earlier. WordPress is still driving so much of the web's traffic. And so many small, medium sites. I know I built 400 or 500 WordPress websites probably in the last 5-6 years. And I haven't built one from scratch in the last 3. That's just how many I was asked working at an agency to do over time. And so many of them did look the same. Just, drop and drag, a little different piece here, a little different piece there, but everything just felt super similar.
I think that, I think there's a reason for that, right? Like they think that their competitor or someone is having some success with it. But I think also web design trends kind of push it. And so I remember seeing a video on this where it talked about the web design trends of 2024, and that Parallax site was one of the biggest trends that they saw with top competitors or top companies, because they felt like it kept users on the site longer because they didn't know what was to come. And so because of that, at least from like, I guess, a selling standpoint, when it finally landed on price or it landed on what this item cost, their attention was completely full. So they were capturing that individual, and if they were ready to purchase, that was like the biggest impulse they needed in order to complete that purchase. And I think web design trends that ends up leading a lot of this. But I feel like in the last couple of years alone, I feel like it's less of this design looks great and more of a these metrics say this is how we're capturing customers. So regardless of whether it looks amazing or not, this is the approach that we're going to be taking. And so I'm starting to wonder how much of that data-driven traffic or that data-driven flow rather is going to be the thing that's guiding us in a lot more of these design changes. And I get it, a business, they exist to make money, but at the same time too, it's like where's that balance at, And I think that was like that whole resurgence of what I call I don't know what the exact name for it was, but I always said the black to less black design. You remember where every website, it was like this huge midnight black and it would go to like a lesser black. And that was like the surge for like a couple years. I'm starting to see less of that now, more of the parallax.
Yeah, I think so much of what's going to change and evolve is based on that. The one thing that the data doesn't capture, or we haven't figured out a good way to measure this, is what are we leaving on the table by going in this direction? Like, we can track whether someone abandons a shopping cart for an e-commerce site, but we can't tell what's preventing them from adding something in their cart to begin with. That is still a huge mystery that not even, the best or worst, depending upon how you feel, tracking software can kind of tell you, okay, here are the funnels someone's going down and here's where they're going. And it goes back to, I think I mentioned off air, carousels. I was having a conversation with a group of devs 2 weeks ago who were someone, whether it was a client or some internal stakeholder, could you add a carousel to this part of the site? Knowing that we have the data that says carousels do not work. Outside of the first slide, your engagement, your click-through rate just falls off a cliff entirely. So we are in this weird position where people know what they like, and then they know there's enough data that kind of reinforces this is the way I'm comfortable doing things. So I'm going to send that to my design team. I'm going to send that to my dev team or my agency partner.
You know what's so funny about that? A good friend of mine, Shashi Low, he worked at a different company, but he currently works at Microsoft, and he's very like UI driven. And I remember we were having this conversation and a debate on when to push back in the company. And so this debate was spurred upon a situation where someone higher up was saying that there's a certain feature that they're rolling out that must have a carousel no matter what. And of course, Shashi's like, look, we have the data. Carousels just don't work. This is not really a good use of developer time, especially for the kind of thing that you're talking about here. It's going to be so intensive to take that many hours away from the team. It doesn't make sense. The higher up was like, no. We have to have a carousel for this. I just see it. I know it's going to work. And Shashi's like, he pushed back a little bit. He's like, all right, he's the higher up at the end of the day. Data's going to drive this going forward. They want it. Let's deliver it to the best of our abilities, and based on this user data and all these A/B testings that we pull out, that will decide it for us, and then we can go back to saying either this was the right move or this was the wrong move. And Shashi was very determined, like, we're going to do this the best that we can, but we just know what this outcome is going to be. We just don't want the hate to come back onto us because we didn't deliver it in the best of our abilities. And it came out, and they started A/B testing it, and the damn thing was one of the best features that they rolled out with it. And for the life, like, I still remember Shashi saying, Danny, this doesn't make sense. Why is this carousel working? And he's like, I've never seen a carousel work before, but here it is. So I think situationally it may turn out, but I think the data definitely says overwhelmingly like carousels just don't work. But I think it just depends on how you're using it. Maybe in that very niche scenario it worked out for him, but I think for the vast majority of the time it won't. But that's also the big reason why I love A/B testing. We don't need to necessarily guess anymore. Put it out there and let's see what ends up, what the users say.
I'll add on to that though, that I think that when I've used carousels, because I was just thinking about it, that when I use carousels, I use them extensively, but when I do, it's because I know what's in it.
Exactly.
And so like if I'm on Amazon and I see a product, I'm going to flip through really quick because I want to see the product being used. I mean, it's again, it's right before the holidays here. I'm Christmas shopping. I'm making sure the thing I'm going to buy makes sense. So I'm flipping through to see what pictures of somebody actually using this thing can I see. And so it's a very effective interface for that. But like nobody's just opening up a random Lightbox carousel to just say what treasures lie within this type of situation. I don't know, Pat, what do you think?
Yeah, the familiarity as an end user makes all the difference in the world. So Danny, when you were telling that story, I have an exact parallel in my day job where there is a feature I know my team is going to build in 2025. And thankfully we figured out a way to really get some internal value behind it. But we know it's a sales driver. Having a checkbox on a list on a marketing site makes a ton of difference in the world, especially knowing our competitors have a feature. But we have the data that says this doesn't get used that much. We're still going to build it because we probably have 5% power users who it could end up driving more sales. So having the data, knowing what it's there for, and accepting, okay, sometimes we're doing something that doesn't make logical sense, but there's a payoff at the end. If it works, and don't argue with success.
So here's a question to you. I feel like as web users, we're becoming a bit more boring ourselves in the sense that we just are utilitarian. We want the web to give us the information we want, and we don't want a lot in our way, right? I mean, like, I'm a gamer as well, and I remember when like Hearthstone first came out, they made these like game boards, and one of the fun things, everybody wanted to click around and figure out what are all the little widgets do when you click here and you click there. Oh, look, this causes a pinwheel. This shoots a rocket up. And I remember when websites used to have some of that stuff, and people used to pass around on Twitter, look at this Easter egg I found on this website. And I feel like nowadays, people don't want to get caught in the trappings. They kind of just want effective, efficient information and get access to what they want. Like they want the video. They don't want the trappings around it, right? So how do you have flavor? How do you show personality when maybe your users don't want that to get in the way of what they're trying to do? So like, how do you have quiet taste, I guess, on a site to separate yourself?
Do we want to bring back Flash websites? That was the immediate thought that
I've heard people talk about it unironically. So
no, but part of the fun and the whimsy of some of those sites and what led into modern JavaScript today, like it's probably taken 10, 15 years since the death of Flash to get the ability to do certain things that we could do so easily back then. First, we just need a couple better UIs. So we have so many things that just get in a person's way. So we have our own opinions about the carousel, but if someone knows how to use it, they know how to use it, they can get to exactly what they want. They're not fighting against, say, a chat bot or a newsletter pop-up and a cookie banner notification
or let me show you around the website and show you in highlight every single piece and how it works.
Mm-hmm. Or, hey, this is actually a good obtrusive is you have this many days until we can't guarantee your package for the holidays. So we're going to throw that in your face too. We have to start sprinkling things in little by little. I'm very curious. So we're getting better and better, say, animation libraries. We're in the web development space. We are getting closer and closer to what a native app can do. Those seamless interactions. But we still have this weird, this is a desktop site, this is a mobile site, this is a mobile app, and we have completely different experiences. I feel like we got to solve some hard problems before we can sprinkle in a little fun here or there. The occasional Easter egg is very easy to do, but you're going to have to sell it to some higher ups, because if you put something on a site, unless it's in a dev console and it gets caught by someone who's not expecting to, that can lead to some dangerous ramifications. Some companies have the ability to do that, but I'm guessing most of us in our day-to-day jobs, we just don't have that flexibility. The best I've ever done is made a background on a certain area of a site look a different color. So it would tell us, oh, is this feature flag on or off? That was fun to us, but it had no negative impact on anyone.
All right. Well, we have more of this conversation, but first we want to thank today's sponsor, This.Labs. This episode is proudly sponsored by This.Labs, your partner in modern web development and consulting. Here at This.Labs, we specialize in empowering businesses to reach their full potential through technology. We understand that in today's fast-paced tech environment, adaptability and efficiency are crucial. That's why we offer tailored solutions designed to meet your unique challenges and objectives. And our commitment to excellence and client success sets us apart as a trusted advisor in the industry. Discover how This.Labs can transform your business. Visit us at this.co to learn more about our services and how we can help you stay ahead in the competitive landscape. Thanks to This.Labs for sponsoring this episode and my team for allowing me to do fun things like this podcast. And now back to our episode. So Pat, talk to us a little bit about the front of the front piece. We've been dancing around this, talking about what the actual websites are like, but talk about the front of the front end as kind of a, as an area of the industry, because I think there's always been this perception amongst some engineers that the back end is where everything is. And you know what? It's just the trained monkeys working in the front end. I mean, I've had a lot of back end developers just say, just give the front end to the junior devs. It's just a bunch of HTML and CSS, right? I think the front end kind of charged back, but that was in the era of the SPA. I think the front end really had respect because suddenly all the back end code moved to the front end. And then, so now there's this front of the front end. And I love that because now there's people that kind of look down on that as front of the front end. Well, that's not the person who's using React. That's the person who's just doing the templating and the CSS. So talk to us a little bit about what that state of the industry is as far as the front of the front end, kind of its importance and, what people should kind of know about it right now.
I feel like front of the front end or any of those developers are like a general contractor on a project. They know a lot about different areas, different pieces, but they can't do it all themselves. You can't wire anything up unless someone creates an API for you, right? But there's a lot of power and creativity that can go into that front of the front end. I also think the laundry list of things that someone who is focused in that area has to concentrate on can become a bit overwhelming. Just between accessibility, browser compatibility, the idea behind, just light and dark modes. That is a huge, anyone who can pull together a nice light and dark mode for someone who likes things a particular way. I'm on camera because I work remote all day. I like everything in dark mode, so I'm not washed out while I'm on a meeting with a potential client or, a podcast I may or may not be talking to. Little things like that kind of matter. And they can be easy to do when you have tools and abstractions that come along for the ride. But what happens when you have to modify something or jump into it? It takes a little bit of nuance, a little bit of extra skill to say, the big joke was always, how many different ways are there to center a div, right? Center a div on a site. Well, the answers have gotten easier and easier and easier over time, but context matters all the time. And so kind of relating it back to why are things boring? Well, we've all learned to build and do things particular ways because of SPAs, because of single page applications. I feel like we're going in our cyclical nature back towards a templated web where we're using, say, server-side rendered components with islands, or I'm not going to say runes because that's the wrong piece of front-end tech, but we're starting to sprinkle little pieces of interactivity back in with some of our frameworks, which is actually going to, I think, simplify and create a better division of labor. I can go in, I can style a page, I can create a form, I can hook it up to an API, I may be able to create that API, create the typings for that thing. That's a lot of work for one person, but with my team, I always find it best where whatever your specialty is, focusing on that, but know enough of what everyone else around you is doing where you can pitch in when needed. So when I hear and see people driven towards full stack development, well, understanding the difference between an API and understanding how the browser code, the code that whether you're using React and you're dealing with the shadow DOM, you're using Vue, you're using Svelte, whatever, whatever code that ends up being generated, do you understand how the browser actually interprets it, how it's being written, then how is a screen reader reading this? How are you working through a keyboard? I mean, I'm just rattling off things and things and things. So the laundry list of things that, my general contractor needs to worry about gets super complicated. And I think there's going to be a lot of work coming from, too many full stack developers in 2025 might not be able to tackle and fix all the issues that a project manager or a product owner wants you to.
That's an interesting take. And I've been asking this question for a while, and I think we all can agree and know that when it comes to the state of front-end development, even back-end development, a lot has transformed over the last several years. It's gotten much wider. There's so much more to learn, so many more complexities and tools to be aware of. But given the state of the market and the jobs that are even hiring, not being full stack to a certain degree, do you not feel, especially if you can't even list that like on a resume, do you not feel that hinders or maybe holds back some job opportunities for people like that?
And it probably holds back a few internal opportunities as well. Like I try and have everyone on my team do some back end stretch goals, just knowing if something were to happen and you're on the market tomorrow, have I done my best job to kind of put you in a place to compete with everyone else that's out there? It gets tough because I'm hoping for, and this is more pie in the sky thinking rather than can I honestly say this is going to happen based on what I'm seeing in the market. I'm hoping we see a rise of kind of some more small agencies that partner with companies where a small company, so my company, we're around 50 employees. Our engineering team is a little under 12, but the amount of things that we can get to is really incredible because we've stayed together for quite a while. And we understand our code bases and the product that we're working on. Small companies can do that. It gets harder and harder as you're trying to be a small cog in a big machine to kind of do that. So it makes more sense. The person who can fix more things in that big machine is always going to be more attractive. But I'm wondering if you get more specialty shops that pop up, for the longest time, Shopify agencies kind of spun up as more and more businesses shifted to e-commerce. When the pandemic hit and more people had to sell their products online, there was a huge need for that. I'm wondering if we're not going to see more areas in that, especially around accessibility.
I think we could. I can tell you from firsthand experience at a previous organization that I worked at, accessibility became such a big thing that they had to create entire teams for it. And they ended up even creating their own stylized library of components that met all of accessible standards, so that way it would make it easier for making the site more accessible. But those teams were dedicated all of their effort in order to make that. I could totally see a parallel in a world where there are accessible agencies where the whole sole purpose was, let's create a specialized library for your team. That way it can alleviate maybe 80% of the workload that you feel may be necessary to making things fully accessible. I could totally see that. But then when I come to this, I always wonder, what are we doing or what direction are we pivoting in to where it's like, this is going to become the new norm as far as like knowing something full stack-ish might help you versus being well-versed. But when it comes to being a full stack developer anyway, I think we can all concede one point. You're always going to have one part of the stack that you're way better at than the other. And so for me, I don't ever think of a full stack developer as you're beyond excellent at both. I look at it as one side you're excellent at, the other side you can get something done if you need to get something done. And so I guess to that degree, when you're even thinking about training some of your devs on your teams for that, like what angle do you take on that? Like, do you think, hey, we're going to be really front end focused, but you need to know a couple things here on the back end? Or is it like, I need to kind of have a balance between the both just in case I need to throw you on something on the back end so that way we can fix an immediate emergency?
One issue my team runs into is, so we have dedicated front end and back end roles. We divvy out responsibilities, and by and large, the front end team rolls through things faster than the back end team because, let's be honest, APIs are more complex, dealing with multiple systems, dealing with authentication. My company, we deal a lot with grades, so making sure things that get graded that end up affecting a student has to be done right. There's no question about it. So freeing up more opportunities for the front end gets a little tricky. So finding areas where they can stretch. Can you look at, say, a model for something in Rails, knowing that at our company, we have mostly a Rails backend and a React front end? Can you look in here, see what's going on, and can you explain it back to me? And then when, hey, we just need one more piece of data. It's already computed. It's saved in the database. Can you pop that out for us so I don't have to take someone off another task to help unlock you? I've had some pretty decent success kind of going down that path. What are these small areas where we can get some small wins? Let the other backend folks focus on the big gnarly issues. But how can we just get you introduced? And with some folks, I found they start to really like the backend stuff. I was one, I never wanted anything to do with it. I never liked the idea of going completely full stack. And now there are days, okay, I'm studying a lot about databases now. I'm diving full in on Postgres. One, because it'll help me with my job now, but two, okay, I'm getting a little more interested. I know what I know. Now I kind of want to know a little more. And I think the tinkerers are going to be the most successful at that. And I have several tinkerers on my team.
So why isn't the industry recognizing this? So I mean, to some extent, what Danny's been talking about is that, listen, if we go to a podcast, if we go to an event, and somebody asks the question, I'm a new developer, or I'm an aspiring developer, what is the skill I should learn? And everybody's like, you need to learn React. You got to learn Next.js because that's where most of the jobs are. Well, guess what? On every website, you know what it all results in? HTML and CSS, no matter how you choose to render it. It's weird to me that the question of what should be the thing that I should learn so that I get the most amount of value in is not the front of the front end. If you've ever been on a team that's trying to push every ounce of performance out of a website, you will inevitably start to learn the really small intricacies of each browser and renderer. And if you've never had to lodge a bug on the bug tracking board of, a major web engine, then, you're missing out on that potential of like what your product could be and what you can get out of it. So I'm just curious, like, why isn't everybody raving that should be a specialty? Is it because these things are so tied to just standards and things like that, as opposed to, VC-backed businesses and things of that nature, that just there's not a built-in DevRel component that's really hyping up how many people that there is? Because I've seen so many people in accessibility that are just like, I can't get a job. It can't be that there's too many people, because I just know the people that are like, I can't find somebody that values this enough to pay for it. But at the same time, I think we all recognize this is hard and it's important and it makes a difference for real users. So, why are we undervaluing this?
When you said, I asked this question, and then you gave the answer, it felt like someone was answering a completely different question. What are the skills I need to learn was your question. And what they were answering is, what will get someone in the door fastest? What is the tool that I need to use that we spend a majority of our time on? So understanding the underlying code. This is why I love staying in front end. Until HTML and CSS, until rendering engines like Chromium go away and don't power the LED screens at drive-thrus or inside stores, there's always going to be work for someone that knows how to use these tools, period. I think we focus on the tools because it's an easier starting point. How can I get everyone kind of on the same page and working in the same area? Not knowing all the nuances. Like, you could have a front-end performance engineer, a front-end accessibility engineer, and someone who's just really, really good at intricate layouts that we're not seeing on the web, if we want to get a little more fun and creative with our paintbrushes. Those are three completely different roles that could take up a majority of someone's 40-hour work week if they're full-time. That's hard to find in one open position or one contract position. So some people, it's going to be tough for a little bit longer. It really is. I advocate for, if you're going to spend your time learning a framework like React, and the reason why it's so prominent is because everyone already has their code bases in that. Do you understand how React works under the hood? When I'm writing a use effect, what's really happening? When I am writing a functional component, how is that getting compiled to vanilla JavaScript? And then what is that doing in the DOM? Because if you're spending all your time just working with one tool and using that tool to serve every purpose, well, I can't build a house with just a hammer. I also need nails. Well, maybe a nail gun is the more appropriate tool for this case. I can't paint a wall with a hammer or a nail gun. So you're constantly shifting. What am I doing? What am I using these things with? One things I see a lot in people who they're in Discord communities and they're wondering, hey, what's up with my code? Everything kind of gets shoved into one tool. And I realize, do you know you don't actually have to do that in React? There's another way to do that. Are you familiar with the browser API? So it's like pulling folks back and kind of reintroducing or reteaching things that some of us who might have started a decade or more ago had to learn by the nature of this was the direction of the industry. These are how, when browsers were slow to evolve, we had plenty of time and space to catch up to things. And we're never going back to those days, unfortunately. So it's kind of incumbent upon the people asking those questions for individuals looking for jobs. Well, how can I help them get in the door and then branch out a little more over time? So I've spent time, I have my devs, we try to write as much vanilla CSS as possible so that if you go to a place and you're using Tailwind, you actually understand what all those utility classes are doing. And so that you can then go back into a browser and debug something. You know, Tailwind may not be my cup of tea, but I realize it's far too powerful and it makes sense in so many situations for different companies and different teams. I can figure out Tailwind pretty quickly because I know the fundamentals underneath it. So I know we struggle with, we had so many people coming out of cohorts coming out of boot camps, and they're taught one specific skill. Then it comes kind of people in my position, we got to kind of help them backfill things on the job.
So, you know, some people, they learn through those cohorts or through boot camps and things like that. You even said yourself that if you needed to learn Tailwind, you could figure it out pretty quickly. Given today's state of the market and, you know, developers coming up or things of that nature, what would be ways that you'd recommend them to learn? You know, some people have learned from books and some people have learned from courses. Some people learn from different resources. Are there some that you think are a little bit better than others? Or is there a direction that you would guide certain people to take to try and learn and skill up?
I think it depends on the specific skill they're looking at. I know personally, I learned CSS from a book. And then I would take websites and I would expect them in reverse engineer. You can download the HTML and CSS and JavaScript files, whatever loaded on the front end from any website today in your browser. Take that and deconstruct it. See how all the parts go together. But then I think the real key is finding a voice that actually makes sense to you. There's so many great instructors that put out courses, both free and paid on the web, but not all of them are going to resonate with you. Not all of them are going to click to help you learn. It's like finding that right teacher in school. You know, you have a subject that you struggle with, but all it takes is one person to kind of unlock different possibilities. So the real key, I think, is you need to try a lot of different things and then pick and choose 2 or 3 to stick with. You can't keep up with everything. Things move too fast. One of the blessings is we have so many creative, wonderful teachers, educators, course creators that are out there. They're sharing their knowledge. But you can't learn from everything. You can't learn from everyone. So you have to pick and choose. So just narrow the field down. Honestly, it's the only way. And until we get to a point where companies have time and money to invest back into developer education, where you're spending, let's say it's an 80-20 split, that 20% time back into how can I level up your skill, or how do we keep a certification, you know, in track like other industries do. We're going to be facing this problem over and over again. And it's always going to come down to an individual solution for every individual use case.
Great. Well, very quickly, we've come to the end of our conversation. So, Pat, can you let people know where they can find you online in case they want to keep this conversation going or find out more?
Sure. My website is patclarke.dev. That's CLARKE. From there, you can find my links to Twitter, to Blue Sky, to GitHub. I'm around on various Discords I think I have listed on that page. So if you'll find me. Otherwise, my online handle is left shot dev. I'm a left-handed shooting hockey player who happens to dev. So that's where you'll find me.
Awesome. Well, that's going to be it for us today. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this Modern Web podcast. Thanks, of course, to our guest, Pat. As always, we say the conversation does not stop here. You can find Pat on Twitter, at least, at LeftShopDev. All the other links you can find at patclark.dev. You can find me online at RoboCell. As for Danny, you can find him online at DThompsonDev. For the podcast, you can find us online at moderndotweb.com or on Twitter at modern.web. And as we round out, we'd just like to thank today's sponsor, This.Labs, one more time, who would like me to remind you that sometimes it's hard to bridge the gap between business objectives and tech implementation, and it can get messy. This is trusted by top names like Meta, Google, and T-Mobile, and they love helping business leaders fulfill their strategic digital initiatives. Check them out at this.co. One more time, that's THISDOT.co. All right, everybody. Hope to see you all next time. Bye-bye.